friends, maybe potentially lovers. Anyway, so we're back. We're back from the break. I hope everyone did a very quick poo. Just keep digging that poo hole. Probably a hole, isn't it? Okay. Cool. So we're back from the break. Everyone did a quick poo, and reminder: the love letters at the back. Write one. Write to your secret love, and it'll be given to someone else, which is very cool. There are no more copies of Archer because everyone got their little mitts on a copy, which is great. Okay. So on with the show. So we've got our next artist on, Eugene Yang. You're popular. Cool. Eugene Yang and has been published by the ABC, SBS, the Suburban Review, Mouse Magazine, Penciled In Magazine, iBag Magazine, and Page 17 Literary Magazine. Eugene is exceptionally emotional about food and has an irrational fear of giant squids. All right, give it up for Eugene!
Sorry. Damn it, I forgot to do that. One job.
It's that one. It's all right. Just want to clarify that if I'm red in the face right now, it's not because I'm terrified of public speaking. It's because I lack the enzyme in my liver that's required to process alcohol. I'm not self-conscious. I'm just consciously poisoning my body so I can socially interact. There it is. Another man who suffers from Asian flush is Haruki Murakami, who wrote Norwegian Wood, which is the text that I've got my quote from. I first read it when I was 18, and it was this really powerful, representation of the turbulence of a young and raw kind of love that I think we all experience around that age, before love knows what it is and how it feels, and at a time when it might be mixed with other first-time feelings like grief and loss and guilt. So this quote comes up in the third act, and it's when the main character, Toru Watanabe, is 20 years old and languishing about being caught between two loves. He talks about, quote, a tremendously quiet and gentle and transparent love for one woman and a wholly different emotion for another that, quote, stands and walks on its own, living and breathing and throbbing and shaking me to the roots of my being. I don't know what to do, he says in a letter. I'm not trying to make excuses for myself, but I do believe that I've lived as sincerely as I know how. I've never lied to anyone, and yet I find myself tossed into this labyrinth. A reply comes back from essentially the book's only adult 5 days later. I think you take everything too seriously. Also, side note, labyrinth, like that's such a male term to describe your angst. It was funny revisiting the book for tonight and finding this one line there because it's this like fundamental story about angst and pain, and then there's just one adult that's like, calm down, no one's getting tossed into labyrinths, it's all okay. There's this subtle voice of maturity that's hinting that nothing is permanent and that the good and the bad that can feel like the peaks and the pits of our lives always move on to something new. And that love is a messy and imperfect process that we need to trust and work through that sometimes fails, rather than something to expect in a perfect package from the very beginning. That's an understanding of love that I've grown into more recently, and I wish I'd taken note of this quote a little bit earlier on my first reading of Norwegian Wood, because maybe I'd have been spared a bit of anguish myself. It then occurred to me that this whole novel is framed as an extended reflection of an old Toru Watanabe who loses himself in this traumatic and extensive recollection of young love every time he hears Norwegian Wood by the Beatles. And without taking anything away from the real drama of the story, it made me think about maybe one tragic aspect of the book being that he missed the meaning of those words, because love is so often put on a pedestal of perfection. There's another text that has informed a younger idea of love that I held, which will come through in the thing that I actually wrote. It's a really beautiful poem, but it's also grounded that hyper-romanticized, idealized, glamorized notion of love that just made everything too serious, too expectant, and too short-sighted. So I wrote something for tonight that kind of plays on that progression of the ways we expect too much, the ways we might reject it, even as we think we're seeking it. It's called Bright Starfish. Every time I see a star in the night sky, I'm reminded of John Keats' Bright Star and how you were almost my own. I was 24 then. Awoken in the dead of the night by a cold wind from an open window was the warmth of your body lay beside me. I pulled the blanket away slowly, quietly, and arose naked into the chill night air to close it. Our clothes were scattered across the floor, remnants of a night of passion, of hands exploring bodies like nomads traversing new land, marveling in its beauty and promise of the future, of passion, living and breathing and shaking me to the roots of my being. I beheld you in my sight as I turned back, entwined in your sheets and pillows, slithers of your skin exposed and illuminated so softly by the light of the moon. My sleepy heart awoke. It dawned on me then that this was love. That just as Keats longed for time to stand still, to look upon his lover, Fanny Brawn, with the eternal adoration of a star gazing down onto the beauty of earth, this was the moment of my love's affirmation. You, I realized aloud, you are my Fanny. I moved to look upon you, not lone in splendor, hung aloft the bed, your bosom betwixt those cotton sheets, rising and falling with tender, taken breaths. And in my gaze, I beheld the lives we would lead, the places we would go, the careers and adventures and children we would share. Wait, children? My waking heart beat faster. How far away would they be? Would I be ready? Would I be a good parent? What if something happened to me, to us? What if you forgot my nut allergy and poisoned me in a foolish attempt at love? What tragedy would befall us then? What if we holiday to Italy and you meet a local to gallivant away with while I'm caught back here paying off a mortgage and supporting our ungrateful spawn? Sweat grew upon my forehead. No, love doesn't doubt like this, I thought. I feel less like Keats' star and more like a simple meteorite pulled towards you, soon to dissolve in your atmosphere. Yes, dissolve, I thought. I should do that. Perhaps it's best I leave now. It's the polite thing to do when one doesn't find true love immediately. I rose again from the bed, forgetting our clothes scattered across the floor, remembering them only when I slipped and crashed upon the ground where sleep reclaimed me. Many years later, as you face the firing squad of your friends questioning what you see in me, you would remember that distant night that was the first we shared, and the heavy thud that awoke you, and your confusion on finding my body, asleep, alone on the floor, limbs splayed like a dislocated, bright starfish. Naked on a cold winter night, yet sweating, face engulfed in your underwear. But I was lucky that accidental sex appeal is your favorite kind of sex appeal. And apparently, my cold and sweaty body glistened nicely in the moonlight. Nicely enough that, as sleep reclaimed you, you thought I was worth keeping around, and that when the sun rose, you kept me around long enough to find other things with which to fall in love.
That was awesome. Good job. That's fucking good. All right. Our next artist is Gabriela Georges. Gabriela Georges is a Syrian-Australian singer, writer, and performer based in Naarm, Melbourne, who often explores identity, loss, grief, and nature. In 2018, she became a part of West Writers Group, a diverse writers collective based in Footscray, and started performing songs in her first language as part of a collaborative project called Bookjare. Gabriela also facilitates open spaces around death, dying, grief, and loss through her community-based project Soul Arts, and is considered the weird younger sibling of 4 sisters. This year, she's one of Jed Press's featured authors. Give it up for Gabriela!
Hi everyone. My name's
Setting up.
yeah. So I'm gonna sit down slowly, and trying to fix this mic thing.
Oh yeah. I'll do that. So you sit down. Oh. God damn it. It's real tight. Maybe go down like that. Yeah. I was gonna move towards you. There we go.
We're getting there.
I've been a comedian since I was 18 and I'm still fucked with microphones. Just get up.
Alright. Maybe I should just keep talking. So yeah, thanks to Emerging Writers Festival for I guess having us all here, and it's been really cool to see so many fresh voices. And I just want to say that I'm in the same club as Darlene. What I wrote isn't funny or sexy. It's a little bit sad. Well, it's all about perspective. So I'm going to sing a song, but first I'm going to read something that I wrote. So yeah, maybe I should talk about my quote. That's not up there yet. I don't know it off by heart. So there we go. It's a quote by Khalil Gibran, and ever has it been that love knows not its own depth until the hour of separation. And I've been, in the lead up to this event, I just started reading a lot of, I guess, poetry and writing by Khalil Gibran about love. And I think I fell in love with him in the process, and I'm just like, oh great, now I'm in love with a dead guy and I don't know what to do about that. Yeah, his writing is just really profound, and this is something I read this book quite a few years ago, but then I reread it when I was just feeling like I was maybe a bit lost, or I needed to. I knew at the time when I first read it that I learned so many things reading that book, so I just thought I need a little bit of guidance and some wisdom from this book again. So I reread it, and it's such a neat, you could read it in a day, but there's so many amazing kind of pearls in there to pick up on. And this quote it's kind of like, sometimes when writers can articulate something you've been feeling, or but you just don't know how to put in words, and then you hear something that someone's written, or you read something and you're just like, yes, that's exactly what it is. That's what I've been feeling or thinking about. And this is one of those. So anyway, I'm just going to start. So this is about loss, and if you feel the need to, you are welcome to step out or take a break. On March 23rd, 2009, I watched the most central person in my life take her last breath. I was 20 years old when my mom was diagnosed with a very rare form of cancer. The diagnosis came as a shock to my 3 older sisters and I, as there was no known history of cancer in the family. We had no idea what we were in for. Hospitals were not places we were accustomed to, and medical professions were not people we regularly came in contact with. All we could do was learn as we went along, taking each day as it came. Over the 4 months following my mom's diagnosis, we saw our mom slowly deteriorate as the cancer and its treatment withered her away. These 4 months is really where the grief began. It began when the vibrant, nurturing and tenacious woman we knew to be our mom started changing physically, emotionally, mentally, and possibly even spiritually. During this time, our growing grief existed in parallel with daily life, encased in moments of isolation and mostly invisible from the outside. Everyone deals with loss differently, but one of the first emotions I personally felt was actually relief. The relief of knowing that my mom was no longer suffering or in pain. Over time, the reality of my mom's physical death continued to solidify with every birthday, anniversary, New Year, and other special occasions that passed, not least of all being Mother's Day. Some years when it comes around, I feel fine and move through it like any other day. Other years, I just wish it would all disappear, that I could avoid it completely, because it hurts knowing that I can't take my mum out or give her a hug and kiss like so many others I know. Sometimes I write a poem or a card for her, and usually my sister and I will go and place flowers at her grave, wishing her a happy Mother's Day there. I've learned that just because a person dies, it doesn't mean the relationship or love dies with them. It can continue in many forms. For example, I continue to wear her scarves and accessories. I'm wearing her earrings and necklace today, and her ring actually. I continue to write to her when I'm feeling confused. I continue to revert back to wise advice she gave. I continue to share her words and talk about her. I continue to cook some of the meals she made, albeit in my own way. And in general, I strive to live my life in a way that would make her proud and in a way that honors her spirit. I feel it in my body when I'm doing something my mum might have done if she were here, like an act of kindness or an act of service to others. Those moments are when I feel closest to her. Embodying her generosity reminds me that I am my mother's daughter and that her spirit does live on. And if there's one gift that grief has given me, it's perspective. Knowing what really matters, knowing who really matters, and knowing life is too short to dwell on all the other shit. So over the years, I've sort of spent a lot of time just thinking about things and processing things, and I've realized that I guess the intensity of grief that one might feel is, for me, is a result of how loved I've been, or how much love I've given, in a way. It's funny. So it's like, it's actually a symptom of that love, that it all will come to an end. And I think following my sort of experience of grief, that it sort of still continues, but it's sort of made me realize that every relationship that I'm in, whether it's like with family members or whether it's with, I'm not really a romantic, but anyway, if I'm dating or whatever, like I realize that I'm always mindful that at some point it's going to end, or at some point that person's no longer going to be here. And I think about that quite a lot. And so it's sort of changed my perspective on love. I don't really fantasize about I don't really romanticize love at all. I'm like, I just want to get to know the person, and if they're cool, we can hang out. But if we can't be friends, then I'm really not interested. And because it's like that's the stuff that will remain, like if that foundation. Romance kind of always like puts me off, and I'm just like, this is fake. I'm not falling for this. So anyway, but I wrote this song this year. I can't remember what prompted me to, but it's I guess dedicated to anyone that's lost someone, and also that's going through grief. I realized like it's not something you just get over, it's something that you learn to live with, and it just becomes a part of your life. So, well, in my experience. You can all hear that? Yeah. You've been on my mind in between washing on the line and cooking my meals. What used to taste so sweet is soured with tears. I thought I'd let you know, and maybe you'd visit. Maybe you'd visit, 'cause just the other day I wanted to hear your voice. I wanted to feel your touch. I wanted to ask how you're doing, how you're doing. Just the other day I wanted to see your face. I wanted to know if your hair's long or short. Has it grown? Has it grown? I've lived underground, constantly sifting through the lost and found. Got tired of digging, it's been 10 long years, and still you were missed. I thought I'd let you know, and maybe you'd visit. Why won't you visit? 'Cause just the other day I wanted to hear your voice. I wanted to feel your touch. I wanted to ask how you're doing, how you're doing. Just the other day I wanted to see your face. I wanted to know if your hair's long or short. Has it grown? Has it grown? Wanna give you my love. I wanna give you all of my love. I wanna give you my love. Wanna give you my love. Just the other day I wanted to hear your voice. I wanted to feel your touch. I wanted to ask how you're doing, how you're doing. Just the other day I wanted to see your face. I wanted to know if your hair's long or short. Has it grown? Has it grown? Has it grown? I wanna know. I wanna know. I wanna know.
All right. That was beautiful. All right, so oh shit. Cool. So we are up to our final artist for tonight, and it is Alistair Baldwin. Alistair Baldwin is a writer and comedian based in Naarm, Melbourne. He's written for ABC's The Weekly, Hard Quiz, Get Crackin', in which he also appears as a very tired PA. He was a Wheelers Centre Hot Desk Fellow for 2018 and has had work published by Acne Ideas, Magazine, Art in Australia, Archer, SBS, and more. Give it up, Alistair.
Thank you so much for having me. If I cry during my piece, don't give me credit for that. That's the residuals from an amazing song. But yeah, so my quote, Agatha Christie.
Yes!
Wonderful. Growing up, I read many books about the bonds of friendship and family. Enid Blyton's The Magic Faraway Tree, as my mum did. And then when I grew too old for that kid shit, Enid Blyton's The Famous Five. It's actually pretty edgy stuff. There was the Globe this recorder, which saw Charlie Ashanti, a young boy with the ability to talk to cats, free a family of lions from a travelling circus, who in return helped him free his parents from an evil pharmaceutical company. And of course, a series of unfortunate events, the dire tales of the Baudelaire orphans who somehow survived through a mix of smarts, luck, and sibling love. These books, expressly written for children, never delved into romantic love or sexual lust beyond the nascent crush, the rosy blush. No, the first books I read, devoured, that explored the intense pull of romantic love were by the writer that would become my first literary obsession, mystery novelist Agatha Christie. Consequently, my understanding of romantic love was not always as something pure or good or constructive. No, romantic love's quite different, I learned. It can be toxic, destructive. It can be so powerful to occlude all existing morals one might have, all deference to the criminal laws of the carefully maintained society you were raised in. Romantic love, I learned, is a potent motive for murder. And this was only when romantic love was real, of course. More often than not in a Christie work, romantic love was a facade beneath which a deeper, cruder lust for wealth lay waiting. I love you more than anything, declared handsome men with slicked back hair to their fiancés, keeping one blue eye firmly locked on the inheritance, the house, the land they were marrying into. That, or love was a tool to be leveraged in a killer's master plan and discarded easily. Kill my husband and we can be together, whispered sultry women to their gardeners. Fists clenched around the sharp hat pin that would sink smoothly into the neck of that gullible lover once he'd done his job. Reading Agatha Christie, it's easy to believe she thought romance was folly. Indeed, part of the clarity that her two most popular detectives, Miss Marple and Hercule Poirot, had about the human condition was, explicitly and implicitly, a product of the lonely archetypes they embodied. The spinster, who knows human nature well by observing it at a distance. The emotionless sleuth, who sees people as puzzles. But to say that Christie's focus on love's downfalls means she cannot write of its uplifting joy is willfully reductive, if also a common argument that's made. Perhaps that's why the 6 romances she wrote in her time were sold under the pen name Mary Westmacott. As we all know, once you're pigeonholed into one genre, no one would believe you're a dab hand at another. This was, in fact, something I believed about Christie until I burned my way through the Marples, burned my way through the Poirots, and in desperation settled for her lesser-known protagonists, Tommy and Tuppence, introduced in The Secret Adversary. It begins with 2 childhood friends running into each other on the street who decide to get lunch. In the 20s, Tommy, a demobilised soldier who served in the Great War, and Tuppence, a demobilised nurse, have both spent their gratuities, the small sum of money as thanks for postponing their youth to serve Queen and country. The absence of a purpose, of the excitement that comes with daily tragedy, leaves them drifting, aimless, days filled only with time to fill, attention to capture. Tommy is hesitant to grab lunch until Tuppence cuts through the etiquette to declare that they can split the bill. She knows he's just as poor as she is. Discussing the lack of excitement in their lives and job scarcity, Tuppence comes up with a grand idea, an ad in the paper offering their youth, time, strength and smarts to the highest bidder. They edit their ad together, deciding that putting the standard no reasonable offer refused might lend itself to only boring odd jobs. Instead, they hit on 2 young adventurers for hire, willing to do anything, go anywhere, pay must be good, no unreasonable offer refused. Thus, the Young Adventurers Limited is born, hired within the day to track down a treaty meant for the American Embassy in London. To speak too much of what happens next is to ruin the plot, but suffice to say, they are embroiled in espionage, murder, and kidnapping. In finding each other, Tommy and Tuppence find a way forward, a friendship that becomes a business partnership that becomes, unsurprisingly, more. For them, and for me, love is pulling each other out of loneliness, out of boredom, out of a sadness you didn't know you lived with. 4 months ago, when I agreed to this reading, I was over a year into my first real relationship, over a year into my first true romantic love. 2 months ago, it ended. It didn't end badly, nor, as this reading might suggest, did it end with me murdering him. It was quite amicable. We went to see Detective Pikachu at the cinema, and within an hour of leaving, we broke up. Now, I don't know how related Detective Pikachu is to the breakup, and seeing as I didn't pick Detective Pikachu as the literary piece to respond to, you'll never know too. I will say that the experience of agreeing to a reading about love shortly before breaking up with someone is like signing up to a Pilates class in a week's time, and then a day before it starts, you go see Detective Pikachu, and then an hour later, someone breaks your kneecaps with a baseball bat. But like Tommy and Tuppence, me and my boyfriend started as friends and gave each other one of the best gifts 2 friends can give each other, something more. After the villain has been revealed and peace restored, Tommy and Tuppence find a moment alone to reflect on their first odd job as the Young Adventurers. It has been fun, hasn't it, Tommy? I do hope we shall have lots more adventures, says Tuppence. You're insatiable, Tuppence. I've had quite enough adventures for the present. Well, shopping is almost as good, says Tuppence dreamily. Think of buying old furniture and bright carpets and futurist silk curtains and a polished dining table and a divan with lots of cushions. Hold hard, says Tommy. What's all this for? Possibly a house, but I think a flat, replies Tuppence. Whose flat? Asks Tommy. You think I mind saying it, but I don't in the least. Ours. So there. You haven't really proposed now, not what our grandmothers would call a proposal, but what fun it will be. Marriage is called all sorts of things, a haven and a refuge and a crowning glory and a state of bondage and lots more. But do you know what I think it is? What? Asks Tommy. A sport, says Tuppence. And a damned good sport too, agrees Tommy. I think it's telling that Tommy and Tuppence are the only 2 Christie protagonists who actively live a full life. Marple and Poirot are written in a kind of stasis, remaining at the vague ages of old and quite old, while the decades continue around them. But Tommy and Tuppence live a full life together. They get married, they get a house, they get a dog. They age as Christie does, and in Postern of Fate, the last novel Christie ever wrote, they're still solving mysteries together in their 70s. For me, I think that's what love is, or what it can be when it's not motivating people to murder. Love can be, quite simply, one of the best ways to spend the time you have. Thank you.
Everyone's making me want to fall in love again. Terrifying. I would like everyone to give a huge hand to everyone who's performed tonight. So give a huge hand to Natasha, Darlene, Eugene, Gabriela, Alistair. Thank you so much. And huge thank you to Archer who put on this event, and they've run out of free copies. But I've been asked to also read a piece from Archer, and so I'm going to read a piece that I loved, a section of it, by actually the writer is here tonight, coincidentally. I loved her piece, Jess Knight's piece. I loved it. It's so fucking good. So I'm going to read the end of it. Sorry, spoilers alert. You want me to read the beginning?
No, sorry, I was just thinking.
Oh.
Like, it's just the beginning.
Don't read the end, Claire. Okay. All right, cool. So this is by Jess Knight, who's a fucking great writer, and also Jess is doing a show in the Melbourne Fringe Festival. I'm calling it Melbourne Fringe because we are embargoed from saying we're doing a show in the Melbourne Fringe. So have a guess of what the festival that I was mentioning is. Melbourne Fringe. All right. So, it's a Saturday night, and my partner and I are on the couch sharing a bottle of wine, taking turns sipping from the bottle. This long day started with us fighting before I went to see my psychiatrist. When I returned home, we talked more, and it turned into one of those truly beautiful moments that remind us why we're still together after 6 years. I'm trying to be a feminist now, living in sin with someone who didn't go to church every Sunday but is kind and loving. The perfect Mormon life means being the perfect mother and the perfect wife, and I'm so disinterested in it. Sometimes it still sets in suddenly and catches me off guard. The feeling that when I'm going about it all wrong and that I will pay in the end, long-standing effects of religious indoctrination. If living with someone you love and rejecting the rules dictated by old men claiming to be prophets are sending me to hell, if having a few sexual partners, kissing girls and questioning my sexuality throw me out of the Heavenly Father's favor, if finding autonomy and liking it means that I'm really, truly damned to misery, then why, at this stage of my life, do I feel I'm exactly where I'm meant to be? Once I accepted that there was more than one way to love than the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, compulsory heteronormative monogamy, I felt a weight lifted from my shoulders. My childhood doubting was a sign that my mind was intellectually curious and active. This is a thorny path I have chosen for myself. I'm excited to discover where it leads me next. As my partner and I talk and drink, the sky outside darkens and I get drunker. He does not love the story of how I got drunk for the first time. It makes him incredibly uncomfortable to think of someone betraying me like that. I blurt out what I can no longer keep inside. It's not that I want to get married. I take a deep breath. But if you did want to get married, out of all the people in the world, why would you want to marry me? I slug from the bottle while I wait for his response. Of course, he says, somewhat baffled. We decide to have a party at some point instead, perhaps at the 10-year mark, if we make it that long. The idea that I have power to decide for myself whether to marry or not is comforting. Hearts are such huge muscles that contain multitudes. He cuts up fancy cheese and hands it to me with cherry tomatoes. I have no idea when he did this, but I'm inebriated and starving, so it's like magic food plucked from the ether. He carries me to bed, and the last thing I say is, I love you, but you're not my everything person. I close my eyes.
Yeah!
Okay, so you've all maybe want to fall in love again. So that's the end of the night. So I hope everyone fucking falls in love again in some way. Or just like remember what love is. Yeah, just remember it. All right, I've been Claire Sullivan. You've been amazing. This is a late night read to love emerging writing special. Yeah.